In this next video, we shall look at installing SQL failover clustering on the two SQL servers. The first thing we need to do is to mount the SQL CD-ROM image for the installation of SQL. So what we can do is take a CD-ROM tile, add that onto the SQL server. Select from the IONOS images Microsoft SQL Server. We're going to use SQL 2017 for this, but obviously we could do 2016 as well. And then click on Create CD. And then we'll do the same for the SQL Server. So although that SQL has already been installed on the SQL image provided by IONOS, to install SQL in failover mode, we do need to go through the installation process again, which will also require a product key to be enabled and used for that installation process. So with the CD-ROMs both attached onto the SQL servers, we'll just provision those changes. Notice that it will cause a reboot of the two servers as well. So let's confirm that. And then provision a change. Okay, so the CD-ROMs have been attached with the relevant image. We can again just double check the status of the server to see where that currently is in the startup cycle. I think it's still about to start up, which is why I'm getting a remote handshake issue. Okay, let's try one more. Okay, try the other way again and click on console. Okay, we'll just check inside the VM and see if that's ready now to be connected. So number 22, okay. Okay, so we don't need the server manager. We'll just check to see if the CD-ROM is mounted. We can see that's there. So what we'll do is we'll go through the installation on the first node at the moment. Notice I haven't got the relevant drive on this node. Let me just double check the other node as well. So effectively, I don't think it really matters which node you start from. Yeah, so we can see the SQL data here. So we'll start from this node and go through the installation. So this is a matter of just running the setup from the CD-ROM image, which will give us the SQL 2017 options in relation to deployments, etc. So we go to installation. What we can do is create a new SQL Server failover cluster installation. It's a two sort of part process really. What you do is you run this cluster installation wizard on one of the nodes, and then you run the add node on additional nodes inside that cluster itself. So we'll just go through the wizard in adding a new SQL Server failover cluster. Okay, we can also use the Microsoft Update to check if there's any updates or fixes currently at the moment. So we'll just run through this. This should be relatively quick. I'm not expecting any files or more details to be there. Okay, so we've got everything's pretty much passed really, apart from the warnings on the verification settings, which comes from the cluster validation wizard that we run when we created the cluster. So that's fine. We can ignore this. We can just click next. Here is where we would need to specify a product key. So there is a product key that can be used that will enable this feature. For the time being, what I'm going to do is just specify the evaluation version just for this demo purpose at the moment. But normally you'd enter the product key in there, and the same process would happen next. We're going to accept the license terms and agreements. And then what we're going to do is install the engine services, which includes SQL Server application as well as the other elements in there. There are other, I guess, checkpoints that can be added if required in relation to any shared features, etc. But those are the relevant services and components which needs to be enabled. We can leave all the settings default in relation to the location of the driver binaries. And then now we use this really for providing the SQL Server instance name as well as more information regarding that. So here this is asking for the server network name. So this will be the name we choose in relation to the instance that we are presenting to our network. So here this will show up as a computer name on the network itself. So I'll just use SQL inst1. I'm going to use a named instance because there's already a SQL deployment on here using the default instance. So here I'll just call this inst1, again tying up to the computer name. And then what we got really is the information about what's already running on this system. So you can see there is a default instance already on there, but that's fine. We can just click next. So next we'll choose the relevant cluster resource name here. So we've got SQL Server inst1. We can see other names in relation to what's currently being used at the moment, so click next. We're going to use the cluster disk one resource. Should we just refresh this page? We should see, there we go. Cluster disk 2 is the resource type that we're going to use for the SQL data. So if that's not listed, just click on refresh and then the cluster disk should be shown there. We're going to use a IP address for the application. So the address is 10.10.1.20 is the address that we want to use for this resource. And now it's a matter of choosing the relevant account names and passwords that we want to use for the SQL agent and also the database agent. It's probably advisable actually just to create a particular user with certain access rights for the database services themselves, and that's documented inside the SQL documentation in relation to that. For ease at the moment, what I am going to do is just use the standard administrator account for the moment, just so it's easier for me to get things up and running really. So here I'll just choose the administrator account. Actually, just check the names. Actually, that's wrong because that's not the location. I want windom.local and users. Okay, find now. And again, just choose administrator and okay. So we've got windom administrator for that, and the password I'll put in. And again, don't forget, if you're setting the password for that user, if it is a user you create, then obviously you can disable password changes or keep a check on if you are changing the password in there. Okay, so we're just going to look at the location again. Go to Windom and go to users and go advanced and find, and we'll go administrator again. Okay, okay, we're not going to look at volume maintenance at the moment, so we'll just leave that as that. Click next. Number of ways in which obviously you can connect into the database. We can use Windows authentication mode. There's a mixed mode as well. I'll add the current user in there. If you want to use mixed mode with the likes of SA, then you can obviously do that as well. And then obviously put in the relevant password that you want to use for that particular user. Regarding the data directories, you can see that it's picked up S for the location of the data files for the system itself. TempDB, we can change that location to go to a local repository if required. So here what we can do on our C drive is we can create a new folder which could be TempDB. And then what we can do is we can add that location into the configuration here. So TempDB, we can remove that. And then obviously you can change things like size and stuff like that as well if you wanted to. File stream, depending on whether or not you're using file stream for your database, that can obviously be enabled if required as well. I'll leave this off in relation to my environment. It's asking you that if you are creating a local C drive, that makes sure that's available obviously on both nodes of the cluster as well. Okay, let's go next. Okay, so yeah, specify the location, that's fine, click OK. There'll be some information about the installation process going to go in, and from here we just go install. And then we just follow through the installation process that's required for the creation of the database. So we'll let this run for the moment. What I will do while it's running is look to go onto the other server, so 22. What we'll do is we'll create that local folder for the TempDB locations. And then what we can do in the moment is we can also just bring up the installation process for this second node. So here it's installation, and then what we're going to do is add a node to a SQL failover cluster. So we'll click the run on this. And again, I'm just going to use the evaluation license for this purpose. I'm going to accept the relevant terms. Again, it's going to run the wizard. We can do the update as well. so it wasn't very slow in doing the relevant checks and updates. Again, we got the warning on the cluster server configuration, which is fine. We'll go next. So this is node 2 at the moment, which you can see. The SQL instance name is something that we need to add to. So at the moment, it's taking the values from the cluster, which is why these are currently blank at the moment. So if we just go back one step for the moment and then wait for the other server to complete the installation process. So if we look at that, it's currently going through that. If we look at the nodes and also the roles which are currently being configured, we'll see the instance at the moment is going through, I guess, the install process. If I just expand this and move this window up a little bit, we'll see that certain things are being created. They're currently online. We can see the instances there. We can see the IP address, which is there as well. The other thing I want to check is the DNS for this IP address. So if I look at the DNS to refresh, we don't see the DNS entry yet in there. So what we'll do is we'll add the address. So that was SQL inst1. The address was 10.10.1.20. We'll also check the allow any authenticated user to update DNS, which is obviously useful for clustering as well. Okay, so that's made. So I've done that, and then if I just drop that down, go back into server 2, we can see, server 1 is where I wanted, and go back to the install wizard. So everything's succeeded, everything is completed, so we can click close on this. That is all now up and running. So we should be able to switch back over to the other node, so on node 2. If we go next, I'm not sure if I need to go back further just to get more information. Let's cancel this out actually and try again. So I guess it's important to note that that first node needs to be up and running before you execute the add node to the SQL failover cluster. Again, just using the evaluation, accepting the license. We go next. And next again. Yeah, so this time it's picked up, as you can see, the inst1, which was installed on the cluster. This is node 2, which we've got. It's picked up the relevant instance name and what's there. So again, we click on next. We're going to use the configuration which is picked up from the cluster config. So again, just click next. We're going to ask for the relevant passwords to put in. Again, I'll just put those in relation to the passwords. Okay, and click next. So we'll have the summary in relation to what's going to be done, and then we'll just click install. And this will then go through the process of configuring this node as part of that failover node membership. So we'll let that run. If we look at the cluster point of view, which actually I could see via tools. So if I look at the roles, at the moment we've got SQL Node 1 as the sole membership of the role at the moment. Once the other nodes being configured, we should see the membership increase to SQL Node 1 and also SQL Node 2. So we just switch back, which is here, and just let this run. It shouldn't take too long, obviously, to complete. Okay, so we can see that the installation has finished. Everything was successful, which is good. So we can now close this down for the installation. We don't need the SQL resources regarding the installation process. The only thing we probably need on this node really is the SQL Studio installation itself, so the actual tools to connect. We've got that running on the other node, so we can leave that for the time being. Okay, so let's have a look at where we are. If I just refresh the screen, what we should see is everything is currently running on node 2 at the moment. What I should be able to do is move this and select the relevant node. So I should be able to use SQL Node 2. So if I just click OK on that, I'm doing a manual failover at the moment, so everything will offline on node 1 and then move over to SQL Node 2. And again, I can just move this up so we can see what's happening at the moment. So we're just pending the relevant services. So they're starting, and everything is now online on SQL Node 2. And again, I can move that back in relation to where the services are running. So again, I'll just move it back, select node 1, and again, it will shut down and move over to node 1. So for connectivity, we were on node 2 a minute ago. Let's go to node 1. And what we need to do is get on to the Microsoft SQL Studio, and then just connect into the Management Studio itself. And we should be able to connect in either via the IP address or via the virtual server name or computer name, which SQL is presenting as well. So we'll just double check to make sure that is working also. Okay, so we're going to connect into the inst1. So we can see it's SQL-inst1, and inst1 is the database instance that we're going to connect to. We're going to use the credentials obviously as well. So here we can see we're connected into the virtual server computer name along with the inst1. We can also, I guess, look at the various databases which are there. So from this point, really, it's obviously down to creating a new database, a schema, or whatever you want to do. Obviously, in relation to your database for your application itself. But that basically covers the process of installing SQL failover cluster. What I'll do in the final video is to, I guess, go through the process on how to create a SQL always-on availability group and what that process looks like as well. But for the moment, that's it from this video series. Thank you.